My son-in-law shoved me so hard against my own workbench that I felt something snap inside my chest like a dry twig underfoot. I went down on one knee in the sawdust of my own shed, breathing in shallow little sips because the deep ones brought tears to my eyes. The next morning, I drove out to his place in Toowoomba with a dented metal toolbox sitting on the passenger seat. He met me at the gate grinning, wiping his hands on a tea towel, and he said, "Knew you'd see sense, Pop. Bring it inside." Then he popped the catches. Before I take you any further into this, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and tell me down in the comments which town or city you're listening from this evening. I love reading where you all are. I was tuning my old Maton acoustic when I heard the ute pull up out the front. I've owned that guitar since 1978. Bought it second-hand from a bloke in Brisbane who was getting out of the music game to raise his kids. I was 26 then. Played pubs from the Gold Coast up to Townsville, and that Maton went everywhere with me. The neck still has the sweat stain from a Saturday night at the Royal Mail Hotel in 1983. My late wife Marjorie used to laugh at how I babied that guitar more than I ever babied the lawn. I had it laid out on the kitchen table on a soft flannel cloth. The same table Marge and I bought from a deceased estate auction in Ipswich back in 1981. The ute door slammed. Then a second one. Through the lace curtains Marge had hung the year before she got sick, I saw my daughter Bronwyn climbing down from the passenger side of Travis's white Hilux, the dual cab one he'd put on finance against my plain advice 3 years back. He was already striding up the path in those tan work boots he wore even to Sunday lunch, the kind that cost a fortnight of my pension. Bronwyn trailed behind him, shoulders curved inward, the way they used to be when she was 9, and she'd dropped a casserole dish on the kitchen lino. "G'day, Pop," Travis called out, not bothering to knock. He just shouldered the screen door open and walked into my front room like he held the title deed. "Need a quiet word." I set down the polishing cloth. "Kettle's just boiled. Bronwyn, love, fancy a cuppa?" "She's right," Travis said before she could open her mouth. He pulled out one of the dining chairs, spun it around backwards and straddled it. The big silver buckle on his belt scraped the wood. "Pop, listen, that site I told you about. The old produce store on Ruthven Street. The owner's keen to settle this week. I just need to move on it before someone else does." I sat down slowly across from him. The arthritis in my left hip doesn't take kindly to sudden movements anymore. "How much this time?" $60,000. I let that hang in the air between us like cigarette smoke in an old pub. Bronwyn was standing in the kitchen doorway, staring at the floorboards. She wouldn't lift her eyes to mine. "Travis, you still owe me 32 from the landscaping business, and another 14 from those mowers you bought and never put to work. Mate, that's water under the bridge. This is the future. This cafe's going to clear all of that and double it inside 2 years. I've got blokes lined up keen to come in. I just need the deposit. Then take the deposit off them." His jaw worked sideways the way it always did before he said something nasty. I'd seen that look at Bronwyn's 30th birthday, when Marge asked him if he'd thought about cutting back on the beers. I'd seen it again at Easter, when Bronwyn quietly suggested he might want to ring his counselor. "You've got Mum's super sitting in that account doing nothing, Pop. You're sitting on it like a cocky on a bag of grain, while your own daughter's going without. That money is for Bronwyn. When I'm gone, she's going without now." I looked over at my daughter. She was twisting her wedding band around her finger, the small opal Marge had picked out for her catching the kitchen light. She'd lost weight. I hadn't properly clocked how much until that exact moment. Her cheekbones stood out sharp in a way they never used to. "Bronwyn, are you going without? Don't drag her into this," Travis snapped. I asked my daughter a question in my own house. Travis stood up so quick. The chair clattered backwards onto the floor. He moved between me and Bronwyn, blocking my line of sight to her completely. He's a big bloke, 6'3", 15.5 stone of gym muscle he liked to show off in those tight black t-shirts. I'm 5'10" on a generous day, and I weigh about what I weighed when I left school in Goondiwindi back in '74. You know what your problem is, Pop? You sit in this dusty old house with your dead wife's china and your old guitars, and you reckon you're some kind of patriarch. But you're just a tight old man hanging on to money that should be helping family. I stood up too. Slow and steady. Get out of my house. He didn't budge. Say it again. Get out of my house, Travis. And pick that chair up off the floor before you go. What happened next happened the way bad things always happen. Faster than you can think. He grabbed a handful of my flannel shirt with one big hand, walked me backwards through the kitchen and into the laundry, and slammed me against the edge of my own workbench where I'd been sharpening the blades on the lawnmower the day before. The pain in my left side was instant, and it was white, like somebody had jammed a hot iron between two of my ribs and twisted it. My elbow caught the corner of the bench and went numb to the fingertips. I heard Bronwyn cry out. My legs went soft underneath me, but Travis's grip held me upright against the bench for one more long second before he let go, and I slid down onto the concrete floor in a heap. He stood over me, breathing hard through his nose like a bull at a gate. You have a good think about what I said, old fella. About the 60 grand. Have a real good think. Then he just walked out. Walked out the back door, around the side of the house. And I heard the ute door slam. Heard the diesel cough into life. Heard the tires spin on the loose gravel of my drive. Bronwyn was on her knees beside me. Her hands hovered over my chest, like she was afraid touching me would break me further. Dad! Dad, oh God! I'm ringing 000. No. I caught her wrist. My voice came out wrong, thin and reedy, like there wasn't enough wind behind it. No ambulance. Just help me up. Dad, please. Help me up, love. She got me into the old recliner in the lounge room. Every breath felt like a hacksaw working its way between my ribs. I knew I'd done something serious. I'd cracked ribs once before, falling off the back of a truck in 1992, helping a mate move house. I knew the feel of it. Bronwyn was crying now, whispering she was sorry over and over again like a prayer. Bronwyn. Look at me, love. She lifted her face. Her mascara was running in 2 black lines down her cheeks. Has he done this to you? Her face folded in on itself. That was all the answer I needed. How long? Dad, please don't. How long, Bronwyn? Since the 3rd year. He doesn't. He doesn't always. It's only when he's stressed. And he's been so stressed about this cafe idea. And the loan from the bank fell through. And, stop. I put my good hand over hers. Stop making excuses for him. Stop right now. She nodded. Then she put her face down on the arm of the chair and she sobbed the way she used to sob when she was small and she'd skinned her knee falling off her bike. I stared up at the ceiling. The pressed metal panels Marge had loved when we first bought the house in 1985. I asked her, silently, what I should do. The carriage clock on the mantelpiece ticked. The kettle, which I'd put back on out of habit, started its slow whistle from the kitchen. After a long while, I said, help me into the bathroom, love. I need to have a look at this. In the bathroom mirror, the bruise was already coming up purple and yellow along my left side, all the way from under my arm down to my hip. I drew a careful breath in and felt the bones move in a way bones aren't meant to move. 2 ribs at least, possibly 3. I'm ringing Dr. Shanmugam, Bronwyn said. No. I'm ringing someone else first. I sent her home an hour later. Made her promise me she'd say not one word to Travis about any of this. That she'd act perfectly normal, that she'd cook his tea and watch the footy with him, and pretend she'd spent the afternoon sitting with me drinking tea. She nodded, but I could see her eyes were full of dread at the thought of walking back through that front door. I told her, in the steadiest voice I could find, that she should pack a small overnight bag tonight after he was asleep. Just one bag. Hide it under the bed. Just in case. After her car pulled out of the drive, I picked up the landline in the kitchen. I dialed a number I hadn't dialed in 9 years. Whitfield and Pemberton, good afternoon. Lorraine Pemberton. Please. Tell her. It's Russell Halloway. A pause. Some hold music. The same tinny version of something classical I remembered from the last time. Then a voice I'd known since the days I sat on the Music Union Committee. Russell Halloway. I thought you'd died. You old bugger. Not yet, Lorraine. But I need a solicitor. What flavor? The kind that handles assault. The kind that handles family law. And the kind that handles wills. She went quiet for a beat. Russell, are you hurt? Yes, love. Don't shower. Don't change your clothes. Don't take so much as a paracetamol. I'm sending a driver to take you to the Toowoomba Base Hospital right now, and I'll meet you in emergency. We're going to document every last bruise. Are you hearing me? Yes, love. And Russell, you did the right thing, ringing me first instead of the police. I hung up the receiver, and I sat there in the recliner, and I looked at the framed photograph of Marjorie on the bookshelf. It was from her last good summer, December of 2018, before the ovarian cancer found her. She was standing in our backyard holding up a great fat tomato she'd grown, beaming like she'd just won the lottery. Marge, I said out loud, I think I'm about to do something difficult, love. I'm going to need you with me. The carriage clock kept ticking. Toowoomba Base confirmed 3 cracked ribs, a hairline fracture in my left elbow, and bruising consistent with significant blunt force. They photographed every inch of me. Lorraine Pemberton turned up in a Navy suit, took a full statement, took her own photographs with a proper camera, and got the registrar to write specific notes describing the injuries as consistent with being shoved against a hard edge by someone considerably larger and stronger. She drove me home herself just before 2 in the morning. Russell, before we file a single document, I want to ask you a question, and I want you to take your time before you answer. Right? What is it you actually want here? Because there's a half-dozen roads we can take, and they all end in different places. You want him in prison? You want money back? You want your daughter out of that marriage and out of harm's way? You want him gone from your lives? You tell me what you actually want. I watched the streetlights wash past the passenger window. I want him to never put hands on my daughter again. I want him to never put hands on anyone again. I want my wife Super to do what she meant it to do. And I want him to know, properly know, who I am before the dust settles. And who are you, Russell? I'm the man Marjorie picked. He never bothered to find out. She drove the rest of the way without saying another word. The next morning I was awake at 5:30. The painkillers had left my mouth feeling like the bottom of a budgie's cage. I made a cuppa, one-handed at the bench. I sat at the dining table with the baton still laid out on its flannel cloth, and I rang Travis from my mobile. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was warm, friendly, the way it always was the morning after. He'd done something shameful and gotten clean away with it. Pop. Mate. How you pulling up? Travis, I want to come over. I've got something for you. A pause on the line. Yeah? I had a long think about what you said. About the future. About Bronwyn. Pop, you don't know how much. I'll be there in an hour and a half. Make sure you're on your own. This is between you and me. On my own. Right. Bronwyn's gone to her sister's anyway. I knew Bronwyn didn't have a sister. Marge and I had only ever had the one child. Travis had been telling Bronwyn for years that her younger cousin Tegan was as good as a sister, and Bronwyn had eventually stopped correcting him. I filed that away. The drive to their place in the new estate out the back of Toowoomba took me 40 minutes. It's one of those new developments where every house looks like it was printed off the same machine, beige render and color-bond roofs and a few sad little gum saplings staked up on the nature strips. Travis and Bronwyn lived in the biggest model on their street. 4 bedrooms, 2 living areas, more square footage than 2 adults without children had any earthly use for. The mortgage on it was, as I'd come to learn, mostly being serviced by quarterly transfers from Marge's super that I'd been making to Bronwyn, transfers Travis was diverting straight into the joint account he controlled. I parked at the curb. I climbed out slow. The ribs were singing. In my hand was the toolbox. Marjorie had bought it for me at Bunnings in 1997 when I'd started doing odd jobs around the neighborhood after I got laid off from the music shop. The red enamel was scuffed to buggery, and the catches were tarnished, and one corner was dented from where I dropped it off the back of the ute years ago. But it locked when you wanted it to lock, and it opened when you wanted it to open. Travis met me at the front door in a polo shirt and chino shorts. He'd combed his hair flat. He smelled of aftershave. His eyes went to the toolbox and did that little flicker poker players do when they're trying not to show their hand. "Pop, come in, mate. Come in." I stepped into the entrance hall. The house was decorated with things Bronwyn had quietly told me she hadn't picked. Big abstract canvases the color of bruises, a glass coffee table no toddler would ever survive, a leather lounge that looked like it had never had a person properly sit on it. "Travis, I won't sit down. The side's giving me curry today." "Yeah. About that. Listen, mate. Take this." I held out the toolbox. He took it. The weight of it pleased him. I could see it in his face. That little brightening around the eyes. He carried it over to the breakfast bar, set it down on the marble, and ran his palm over the lid. "Pop, I have to say it. This is the right call. You won't regret it. The cafe, mate. It's going to open it, Travis." He grinned at me. That wolf grin. "Knew you'd see sense. Old fella." He flipped the catches up. He raised the lid. His face went through 3 different expressions inside about 2 seconds. First, confusion, because there was no money. Second, a wary kind of recognition, because he saw what was sitting on top. Third, the color drained right out of him, because he understood. On top was a thick envelope from the Queensland Police Service. Underneath that, a manila folder bearing a solicitor's seal. Underneath that, a smaller envelope with a magistrate's court summons sticking out one end. What the hell is this? The first one's the criminal complaint. Assault occasioning bodily harm. There's a hearing date inside. His hand started to shake on the lid. The second one is from Lorraine Pemberton, Bronwyn's solicitor. It's an application for a property settlement and divorce. She lodged it yesterday evening at 6 o'clock. Bronwyn didn't. She did. She signed it in my kitchen yesterday afternoon, while you thought she was drinking tea with her old dad. Pop, you don't. The third one is a domestic violence protection order, effective from the moment of service. You're not to contact Bronwyn, not to come within 100 meters of her, my house, or her workplace. Service was completed when I handed you that toolbox in front of the doorbell camera you installed yourself last Christmas. His eyes flicked up to the small black dome above his front door, then back to me. You absolute. Travis. I took one careful step toward him, even though it cost me. I'm 67 years old. I've got 3 cracked ribs and a broken elbow. I drove 40 minutes one-handed to put that toolbox in your hands. Now, you can put your hands on me again, right here, on your own front step, on your own camera, or you can sit down on that fancy leather lounge of yours and you can read every page in that folder. Up to you, mate. He didn't move. He didn't open his mouth. There's one more thing in there. Right at the bottom. You should have a look. He stared at me for a long count. Then, slowly, he lifted out the manila folder and the 2 envelopes and laid them on the bench. At the bottom of the toolbox sat a single sheet of paper, folded in thirds. He picked it up. He unfolded it. It was a printout of a screenshot. A direct message exchange between Travis and a woman named Kimberly Vaughn, dated 4 months before. The first line of the conversation was about a quote for a deck. Everything that came after had nothing to do with decking. His face went from white to dark red. How did you? My daughter has known for over a year, Travis. She just didn't have anywhere to go. And she didn't have anyone to back her. She's got both of those things now. I turned around and I walked out of his house. I didn't look back. I heard him call my name once, and then I heard him say something a great deal uglier, and then I pulled the front door closed behind me and walked to my car as steadily as I could manage. I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too hard to keep the wheel steady. I sat in the car park of a Coles Express servo, and I cried for about 10 minutes. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere underneath your ribs. Then I wiped my face with a serviette from the glove box and I drove home. Bronwyn was already at my place when I pulled in. Her little Mazda was in the drive. She'd brought 2 suitcases and her cat, a big ginger Tom named Murphy. She was sitting on the front veranda on the old swing seat with the cat curled up on her lap. "It's done," I said. She nodded, the tears coming silent now. "Dad, there's something I need to tell you. About Mum." I lowered myself onto the swing beside her, careful of the ribs. "Go on, love." Before she got really sick, that last winter, she knew about Travis, about how he was. She came to me one afternoon when he was out, and she sat on the end of my bed, and she told me she wanted to leave my inheritance in a trust he couldn't lay a finger on. She said she'd talked to you about it, and you'd refused. That you said you trusted me to handle my own husband. I felt the floor of my stomach go out from underneath me. I never had that conversation with her. Love, I know that. I know that now. He must have intercepted her somewhere. The chemist, maybe, or at the oncologist's. He convinced her you'd said no. And then he convinced me that bringing it up to you would just hurt your feelings. And then she went downhill so quickly, Dad. And then she was gone. I put my head down in my hand. Dad, he stole from her while she was dying. He stole from her by lying to her about the man she loved. And I let him do it because I didn't believe she was that sick yet. And then suddenly she was. And it was too late. Bronwyn, love. My voice wasn't quite working. You were not to blame for that. I know. But I also know that if I'd said one word to you, just one, you could have fixed it. We sat on that swing seat for a long stretch. The cat purred away in her lap. The afternoon got hotter, and the cicadas kicked up their summer racket in the gum trees out the back. After a while I said, Bronwyn, there's something else I need to do. I need to find out if there were others. People he leant on the way. He leant on us. She looked up at me. What do you mean? Blokes like Travis don't pull this stunt on one family, love. They pull it on every family they can get within reach of. I want to know who else he's hurt. Because if there's a pattern, the prosecutor needs to know. And because anyone he's hurt deserves to know they aren't alone in it. She thought about that for a while. Then she said, start with his Uncle Garth, out at Stanthorpe. The last time we saw him was at Mum's funeral, and they had words in the car park of the chapel. I never told you because I didn't want to ruin the day. I nodded. Anyone else? There was a young woman who worked at the landscaping business. Annika, I think her name was. She walked off the job suddenly. Travis said she'd nicked from the till, but I never saw any proof of it. And there was the bloke who poured the slab for our shed. He came round the house one Saturday morning shouting, and Travis paid him out in cash from a tin in the garage just to make him go away. I wrote those names down on the back of a docket from the chemist. That night, after Bronwyn had cried herself to sleep in the spare room with Murphy curled up next to her on the doona, I sat at the dining table with the maton across my knees. and I picked out the old hymns my mother had taught me on her piano in the lounge room of our weatherboard in Goondiwindi, back when Whitlam was still Prime Minister, in the garden. How great thou art, just as I am. Marge's favorites. I asked her again, silently, if I was doing the right thing. The carriage clock ticked. The cat came in and rubbed against my shin. I took that as her answer. Lorraine Pemberton had a young paralegal named Daniel, who was, in her own words, a Kelpie with a law degree on the way. Over the next 3 weeks, while my ribs slowly knitted themselves back together and Bronwyn began the long, slow business of working out who she was without Travis, Daniel made phone calls. He found Garth, Travis's uncle out at Stanthorpe, who had loaned Travis $26,000 in 2022 for a sure thing involving second-hand farm machinery. Garth was a retired apple grower. He'd taken the money out of his self-managed super to make the loan. He'd been quietly furious for 2 years and didn't know what to do about it. Because Travis was, after all, his sister's boy. He found Anika, the young woman from the landscaping business, who had been owed 9 weeks of wages when Travis sacked her after she'd asked, politely, about a payslip she'd never received. Travis had also, she told Daniel when he gently pressed, grabbed her by the upper arm hard enough to leave 4 small bruises in the shape of fingertips and threatened to ring immigration about her partner, even though her partner had been an Australian citizen for over a decade. He found the concreter, a man named Wayne, who had been paid only a portion of what he was owed for the slab and had given up chasing it because Travis had threatened to ruin him on every tradie review site on the internet. But the one Daniel found that cracked the whole thing wide open was a man named Desmond Polk. Desmond was 62, a retired schoolteacher from a small town outside Warwick. 3 years before, Travis had bumped into Desmond at a country and western festival down in Tamworth, and over the course of the weekend, and several follow-up coffees back home, had convinced Desmond to invest in a small recording studio Travis was going to set up to capture local artists. Desmond had handed over $41,000 from his super. The studio never got off the ground. The money never came back. When Desmond had pressed hard, Travis had turned up at Desmond's place one Sunday evening uninvited and shoved Desmond hard enough that Desmond had gone backwards into his own hat stand and put his shoulder out. Desmond had told nobody. He was ashamed. His own wife had passed 2 years before Marjorie, and he'd been lonely as a lighthouse, and he'd let himself feel flattered by a younger bloke taking an interest in his old country music records, and he'd lost the better part of his nest egg. I drove down to Warwick to see him. We sat in his sleep-out, and he made me a cup of tea, and his hands trembled when he poured it. Russell, I have to tell you, when your solicitor's young fella rang, I sat down at this table, and I cried like a kid. I'd convinced myself I was the only old gala he'd done this to. You're not, mate. I'd given it up. I figured my pride wasn't worth the fight at my age. I figured I'd carry it to the grave. Desmond, would you be willing to give a statement? Not just about the money, about the day he put hands on you. He looked down into his tea. The hand holding the cup was shaking enough to rattle the saucer. I'd have to tell my daughter. She doesn't know about any of it. She'd be ashamed of her old dad. Desmond. She'd not be ashamed of you, mate. She'd be filthy at the man who hurt you. He looked up. His eyes were wet at the corners. You really reckon? I know it. My own daughter has spent a year defending the bloke who broke my ribs. She didn't do it because she's stupid. She did it because she was caught. You weren't stupid either, Desmond. You were caught. And the only road out of being caught is letting other people see the trap. He nodded slowly. He set the cup down on the saucer. All right then. Yes. Tell me what I have to do. I made one fair dinkum mistake during all of this. I should have known better. Lorraine had told me 100 times to stay clean off social media and away from anything that looked like a public statement. But one evening, after a particularly nasty phone call from Travis's mother, who called me a vindictive old man trying to ruin her boy's life over a bit of family argy-bargy, I logged onto Facebook and I wrote a post. It didn't name him. It said something along the lines of, "Sometimes the ones who shout loudest about family are the ones quietly stealing from it. Sometimes the only way to look after the people you love is to stop sheltering the ones who hurt them. I'm too old to keep secrets for cowards." I posted it at 10:30 at night. By 7 the next morning, my old bandmate's widow had commented praying for you all. By 8, Travis's mother had screenshotted it and forwarded it to Travis's solicitor. Lorraine rang me at 9. I'd never heard her properly cranky before. "Russell Halloway. Read me what you put online last night." I read it. "And how many people can see your Facebook profile?" "I don't know, Lorraine. A few hundred maybe." "Russell. His solicitor has just emailed me a screenshot. They are going to argue you've been waging a public campaign of defamation. They are going to argue this whole proceeding is about a bruised ego, not justice. Do you grasp what you've done? Lorraine, I'm sorry. Take it down. Take it down right now." While I'm on the line, I took it down. But she was right. The damage was done. For the next month, every conversation with the police prosecutor included Travis's lawyer waving that Facebook post about like a flag at the footy. It didn't sink the case. But it cost us. I learned something hard from that. I learned that when you are hurt and angry and right, all at the same time, you are at your most dangerous to your own cause. I wrote that on a piece of cardboard with a felt pen, and I taped it inside the door of my pantry, where I'd see it every morning when I went for the Weet-Bix. The hearing happened on a Wednesday in early March. Toowoomba Magistrates Court, Level 2. The corridor smelled of floor polish and cold coffee. Bronwyn sat next to me on the bench outside the courtroom in a navy dress she'd bought specifically for the morning. Her hand kept finding mine and squeezing. Travis sat on the bench across from us with his solicitor and his mother. He looked smaller than I remembered him. He'd dropped weight. He hadn't shaved that morning, which his solicitor was probably privately spewing about. His mother kept patting his arm and dabbing at her eyes with a hanky. Inside, the police prosecutor laid the case out methodically. The doorbell footage from Travis's own front porch played on the courtroom monitor, showing me handing him the toolbox, showing him opening it, showing him take that menacing half-step toward me before he caught himself. The medical records went in. The photographs. Bronwyn gave her evidence cleanly. She was steady. She didn't break until the prosecutor asked her one specific question. "Mrs. Halloway, has the defendant ever struck you?" She paused. She looked over at me. She looked up at the magistrate. Then she looked across at Travis. She looked across. She looked over at me. "Yes. The first time was in our 3rd year of marriage. He backhanded me at a wedding because I'd had 2 glasses of wine and laughed too loud at something his cousin said. The most recent time was a fortnight before he hurt my father. He pushed me into a wall hard enough to bruise my back. I have photos." That was when she cried. Desmond gave his evidence next. He was nervous, his voice catching, but when the defense solicitor tried to paint him as a confused old pensioner, Desmond sat up straighter on the witness stand and said, "Sir, I taught high school English for 33 years. I am not confused. I am ashamed. And there is a very large difference between those two things. And the difference between them is exactly why I am sitting in this chair this morning." Anika gave her evidence. Wayne gave his. Garth gave his. By the time the defense put Travis up on the stand, his face was the color of old chalk. His solicitor had advised him not to give evidence. I'd put money on it. But Travis had insisted, the way a certain kind of bloke always insists, because he was certain right up until the last minute that he could charm a magistrate the same way he'd charmed every bank manager and every father-in-law he'd ever met. He couldn't. He contradicted himself 3 times in the first 10 minutes. He lost his temper twice. The third time, when the prosecutor calmly asked him about the messages with Kimberly Vaughn, he came halfway up out of the witness chair and pointed straight at me and shouted, "That old bastard stole my marriage off me." The magistrate brought the gavel down hard. "Mr. Halloway, you will sit down or you will be removed." He sat down. But the magistrate had seen everything he needed to see. The verdict came down 2 days later. Guilty on the assault charge. Guilty on a fraud charge that the prosecutor had added once Desmond's evidence came in. 12 months in custody. With parole eligibility after 7, restitution to Desmond, to Garth, to Wayne, and to me. A long-term protection order for Bronwyn that would outlast the sentence by 5 years. As an extra layer, Lorraine had also organized a permanent civil restraint that would be served on Travis the day before his release. When the corrections officer cuffed him, he didn't look at his mother. He didn't look at Bronwyn. He looked across the courtroom at me. I held his gaze. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just looked at him the way Marjorie used to look at students who'd let her down, until he was the one who had to drop his eyes first. Bronwyn and I drove home in the quiet. She made shepherd's pie for tea, because it was what Marge used to make on hard nights. We ate at the dining table with the maton set carefully aside on the sideboard. Murphy the cat sat up on the third dining chair like he'd been doing it his whole 9 lives. After tea, Bronwyn said, "Dad, was it worth it?" I thought about that. Properly thought. Love. Your mother used to say the only thing worse than the truth is a lie you've been carrying so long you can't remember setting it down. We set down a lot of lies these last few months. Your mother's super is going to do what she meant it to do. You're safe under this roof. Desmond Polk is going to get the bulk of his retirement back. A man who hurt people is going to sit in a cell for the better part of a year and have a long think about it. That's not really an answer to your question, I know. No, Dad. It's not. I reached across the table and took her hand. The honest answer is, I lost something I won't get back. I don't sleep the same. I don't trust the same. There's a piece of me that learnt the day he put his hands on me that there's more cruelty in the world than I'd been letting myself see. And once you've learnt that, you don't get to unlearn it. So no, it wasn't worth it in that sense. Nothing's worth that. But the alternative was leaving you in that house, leaving Desmond ashamed in his sleep-out, letting your mother's last wishes be stolen by the bloke who broke into our family. The alternative wasn't worth it either. Sometimes there's no good road. Love. There's only the road you can live with. She squeezed my hand. We sat like that for a while. Then she said, "Will you play me something on the guitar? Like you used to." When I couldn't sleep, I got the matin. I sat down in the recliner. My ribs were just about right by then, only a little tender if I twisted the wrong way. I tuned up. I played in the garden, the way my mother had taught me in 1961, the way I'd played it for Marge in the palliative care ward the night before she went. Bronwyn sat on the floor beside the recliner, the way she used to when she was little, with her cheek resting on my knee. Outside, the autumn dark settled over Toowoomba. Somebody's dog barked once and then thought better of it. The carriage clock ticked. The cat purred up on the windowsill. I played until my fingers were tired. Then I played a little bit longer. Now, before I let you go, I want to say something to whoever is listening. If you are looking after a parent or a grandparent, and you reckon something might be going on behind closed doors that shouldn't be going on, please do not look the other way. The worst thing about what happened in our family wasn't the broken ribs. It was the years where my daughter sat alone with what she knew, and the months where my late wife went to her grave believing I had refused to protect our girl. Silence is the air that cruel men breathe. Take that air away from them, and they cannot survive long. If you're the one being hurt, and you're reading this thinking nobody would believe you, or that it would tear the family in two, please know that the family is already torn. You are just the only one who can see the rip. There are people whose whole job in life is to help you. A good solicitor, a women's shelter, the local police, your old dad, if you've still got him. And to the blokes my age who are listening, if a younger man is sweet-talking you out of your super, your savings, your medals, your ute, anything that you worked your whole life for, that is not family. That is not friendship. That is a wolf in a polo shirt. Trust your gut. Ring your kids. Ring your solicitor before you ring your bank. There is no shame in being targeted. There is only shame in staying silent about it once you know. If this story moved you tonight, do me a favor and give it a like. Hit that subscribe button so the next one lands in your feed. And tell me down in the comments, what would you have put in the toolbox? I read every single comment. I'll see you in the next one.